So welcome back to this training, and this training we're going to look at the ruler's principle. We're going to look at the U of ruler's principle, which is to understand. And I want to break this lesson down into two parts. So in the first part, I'd like to discuss the psychology. I think that is the most important part. And then in the second part, we're going to look at the 4 M's of understand. So let's start with the psychology first. In terms of psychology, we need to know how on earth do we become successful, because there's a way, there's a method that we can follow. I'd like to dive a little bit into the Pareto Principle and show you how that's going to help us to understand ourselves and other people better. And then also we need to look at the 4 investment attitudes so that we can put something together there. And then, of course, we need to look at the commitment that we need to make if you really want to become successful. And unless you're going to have a set of principles to stick to, it's going to be very difficult. So let's look at the psychology, how to become successful. You know, to become successful is actually a very simple and straightforward process, because you need to get the right information, therefore gain the right competencies in the right order for the level of the game that you're at, and then you simply have to do it. And this is where a lot of people make massive mistakes, because they hop, skip and jump, and they do not understand the sequence of becoming successful. Now, to become successful is a science, and the science is when you do certain things in a certain way to get a certain outcome. So what we need to understand in order to have this sequence and to get successful, we have to learn how to become investors or how to become wealth creators. It is not something that we're born with. It is something that we have to learn. Just like you have to learn to become a plastic surgeon, or you have to learn how to become a mechanic, or you have to learn how to become a chartered accountant. It is not something, and a lot of people think that, yeah, but we're supposed to know this stuff. And that is where things really and truly go wrong. Okay, so what's the path that we need to follow? Well, there's the wealth creator strategy. And the wealth creator strategy is intelligent use of limited resources to go from where you are to where you want to be in the shortest possible time with the least amount of risk. If we understand that, and it's actually the risk that we want to mitigate. So in cryptos, we're going to find that the one thing that we need to check and that we need to understand will be the risk. Because if we can get the risk down, then automatically the growth will go up. And that is actually what we are looking for. So we do not want to gamble. We want to make informed decisions. Right. Something else that I want you to understand before we really start diving deeper into this is that we buy the fear and we sell the greed. For that reason, we need to look at our psychology, in other words, the way that we think and act and do, and then also in terms of the masses. And if we can position ourselves, I can almost say, to the opposite of the masses, then our chances for success literally goes up to 99%. And there's what we call a fear-greed indicator built into the system. And perhaps let me go and show that to you, how simple it works before we continue. So if I go to the Dreyer crypto strategy, there's a report that the DCPI report, and that is the Dreyer crypto psychological indicator. And this is up to today. And here we can immediately see this is in, let me give you the date of that one, the 26th of the 2nd, 2017. And we could see there's a lot of fear in the market. The fear relates to buy signals for us. And we are seeing that we're entering into more or less exactly the same thing. We've got a 94% fear factor psychologically. Now, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into it just now, but just keep in mind that this indicator is it is amazing. And if you see that you can literally just use this to be the opposite of what the market is doing, there's massive profits in that, simply by following this psychological indicator. And this has to be part of your system, because what we're doing is we look at the psychology and we look at the signals that we're getting, the mathematical signals. And there's a huge correlation between the two. And that gives us the indication of when to do what. So the program that we've developed was developed taking the psychology into consideration in order to tell us when it's a false buy signal or when it's a real buy signal. Because if you get into the market too quickly, it may be that the market, the general psychology of the market, is not yet in a fearful state, and therefore you're not going to get the maximum growth from that investment. So let's then go to the Pareto Principle. The Pareto Principle, and how I've used this in my little system, is that Pareto discovered that 80% of what people are doing is only giving them a 20% result. If you focus on the 20% important stuff, that you're going to get an 80% result. So when I look at the Dreyer crypto strategy, that's exactly what I did. But then I took it one step further. And I said, okay, but what's the 20% of the 20%? What's the most important part? And that's the psychology. In other words, the 4% is the psychology, because if I take 80% of 80%, that's 64%. If I get the psychology right, in other words, the mindset, the thinking when it comes to how to invest and what to do and how to act and how to react, then 64% of the battle is won already just by doing that. So I'm telling you that 4%, the psychology, is the most important part. If you get that right, the rest is easy. If you don't get that right, it's almost like impossible. So now let's go and have a look at the investment attitudes. From studies that I've done over the last 30 years, I can tell you that there's only two groups of investors. The one is what we call opportunity seekers. Those are the 99% of the world's population, not only in South Africa or in America or wherever you may be. And this is measured in terms of your standard of living. And then there's the top 1%. The 99% we call opportunity seekers, and the top 1% we call wealth creators. But we can break them down into two separate groups as well. Because the opportunity seekers, you create laggers and ziggers. So the laggers, 82% of the population, and 17% will be ziggers. Now, these are the people, if I can broadly quickly tell you, a definition or try to explain that to you, is that they do not want to take the responsibility to learn how to invest. In other words, they trust other people or think that other people will do it for them. Laggers, of course, have got no interest. They want a quick fix solution, and they think they're entitled to everything in life, and they blame everyone for not giving them and not getting what they want. The ziggers, on the other hand, already know that they have to take the responsibility, and those people are most of the time the middle class. They are really hardworking, but the problem that they've got is that in their minds they think that they can't do their own investments, and therefore they have to trust on other people to do it for them. And then, of course, you get the wealth creators, and the wealth creators, that's the top 1%. And the top 1% also in two groups, the zaggers and the blizzards. The zaggers, 0.9%, and the blizzards, these are people that know that they have to take the responsibility, that they need to learn the skills and gain the competencies. Now, we can relate that back to right in the beginning when I said success is very simple, because you need to get the right information or the right competencies in the right order for the level of the game that you're at. So the moment that you're wealth created, you know where you are, you know where you want to go, you apply the wealth creator strategy, the intelligent use of limited resources to go from where you are to where you want to be in the shortest possible time with the least amount of risk. So what and how do we identify the risk? Very simple. We check what the opportunity seekers are doing, because 99% they drive the market, and they do this on price. And it's not only in cryptos, it's also in property. And that's why I'm so successful with property. But it's also in the stock market, and it's basically in any type of investment. You'll find that 90% drives the market, and the 90% does not know what they're doing, because they don't want to take the responsibility to learn how to do it. So a Zagger has taken that, and they get incredible growth. And this whole Dreyer crypto strategy is based on the Zagger's, let's call it, principle. But then there's the blizzard. This is for my wealth creators method students, where we know that there's no risk whatsoever, and we also know that we can get unlimited growth or infinite growth by applying the wealth creators principles. Right. So I think that is more or less what I want to say. And now we can see where the Pareto Principle comes in. So the 4% that we need to understand is that we're simply monitoring the opportunity seekers. And when the opportunity seekers get into a flat spin and they get into the spiral of negativity, we know, let me go back to that little indicator. We simply know, like currently on the third, that what we need to do is to say, okay, if everyone is fearful, because we know that we buy fear and we sell greed, this is the time to buy. In terms of a commitment, I like to make commitments towards myself. Before I start teaching, I need to know what's the parameters and where and how am I willing to operate. So everything that I share with my students, that is of course you, will be from personal experience. I will personally tell you what I invest in, when I invest in what portion of the portfolio. That is actually simple because we've got asymmetrical uniform investment positioning that we're doing. So if I get into a portfolio and if it's $1,000, then everything, all positions will be $1,000 within that portfolio. And then that portfolio is going to grow, but my strategy students and method students will see how that works out. And then the last one, I'm not really going to open that. That will only be for the method students. That is the principles that I live by and that I hear in my personal life, in my community, as well as in my investments. Because I've got like 103 principles that I'm following, and I stick to those principles, or I try to stick to those principles. And the thing about the principles is that I've looked at what rich people and successful people are doing. And I took that from them and then I incorporated, because like I've said right in the beginning, we're not born investors. We're not born business owners. We have to learn these skills. And the quickest way to do is to see someone that's already successful. And if a person is successful, then, or they've got a system that is successful, then duplicate and follow what they're doing. So let me show you quickly. I've already showed you this before, but let's go there again. If I go to the report and the projection report and I do a demo up to today and we see what's the growth, then the total growth is 1,706%. Now, if you've picked exactly the same position without applying the strategy, then the growth on that portfolio over exactly the same period of time would have been 377%. And as you can see, there's a massive difference between a 377% and a 1,700%. And it's that difference that by setting up these rules and regulations and principles and understanding the psychology and bringing that into a system, and that is what is making the difference between successful and not successful, because all I did was to take the right information in the right order for the level of the game that I'm at, and then I convert that into a system or a strategy to follow, and I build the strategy into a system so that I do not have to worry. The system basically tells me when to do and what, and then I've got that little indicator to show me the difference between a false buy and a solid buy, or a false sell and a real sell, a signal. And just that little difference can make 100 to 200% difference in terms of the growth that you're going to get. So please pay really close attention to setting this up for yourself. I know the majority of people don't want to look inwards. They don't want to look at themselves. They don't want to understand themselves. But I would say that is the 4%, the most important part that is going to give you a 64%. And if that foundation is laid correctly, the rest will be easy. Right, so in the next part, we're going to look at the 4 M's. And then you'll see how all of this fits together. And I believe that the understanding part, because unless you understand, don't try to do it whatsoever. Warren Buffett says that is what risk is. Risk is when you do not know what you're doing. In other words, you don't understand it. Right, so I'll see you then in the next lesson.